So thank you all for coming to the first guest speaker session. We obviously have Ben Larson here from Vertosa. So before we dive in, let me just tell you about a few features of InEvent. Mostly, if you go here to the side panel on the right, you'll see chat. So as you've already been doing, people can chat. And then right below that, there's questions. So once we get to the Q&A portion, or throughout the whole talk, you can type your questions in here, and then there'll be a little heart icon next to every question, and you can upvote questions that you would like. So when it gets time, I'll look at the questions that have been most upvoted and answer those first. So you can also kind of like questions that your peers have asked. Okay, so to dive in before we give you the stage, this is Ben Larson. He's become one of the leading names in the cannabis industry today. He's the CEO and founder of Vertosa, which is a cannabis infusion technology company. Prior to Vertosa, he founded Gateway Incubator, which is the first incubator and accelerator program geared towards the cannabis industry in California. He also is the host of a podcast called Marijuana Today, and an investor and an advisor for many other cannabis technology companies, as well as last but not least, a Cal Poly alumni. So we're glad to bring him back and show some Cal Poly pride. So the stage is yours, Ben.
Thanks so much, Sophie. And great to be back. I'll virtually this time. I see a lot of familiar names in the room, so I'll try not to repeat content. Thank you for the lovely intro. It's all true. And as you might have guessed, I went to the School of Cannabis at Cal Poly and climbed the corporate ladder and someday became CEO of this lovely company. And of course, you know that is exactly what didn't happen because, well, there's a lot of becauses in there, but mainly this is an entrepreneur group. So we're going to talk about entrepreneurship a little bit today. I'll try to keep it relatively short so that we can get to the Q&A because that's where all the good stuff is. But before we get there, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey and why I'm still on that journey. and frankly, some things that I wish I had told myself when I was leaving Cal Poly before embarking on it. So let's jump right in. You know, I didn't go to the School of Cannabis because it doesn't exist, nor did I go to the School of Horticulture. I actually was a civil engineer, and leaving school, I was of the mindset that I was going to be on the straight and narrow, that I was going to get with a great company, which I did, and start climbing that corporate ladder towards being a CEO, which I started and actually did for about 6 years and got my professional engineering degree. You know, I was doing a lot of great work here in the great state of California. It did lead me to San Francisco, where I started to become exposed to just people creating really cool ideas. And in my office, one of my colleagues and his wife started an application that basically was a social network built around taking pictures of food. I love food. I love taking pictures of it. So I immediately became one of their first beta users. I had the vanity URL, /Ben. I was really proud of that. And I got to go on that journey with them and watch them grow that company. It was called Food Spotting. It ended up selling to Open Table. And it was just a really cool thing to be a part of. And it was inspiring to see people have an idea, create it, and immediately impact people's lives and create, habits around it. And something about that was really inspiring, especially in contrast to civil engineering, where I would have a great idea, I would design it, and maybe 10 years later, it would get built in some fashion and probably 5 years too late. Not to discount anyone that is still going through the School of Engineering, but it was not my game. So I quit. I quit my engineering career and decided, you know what? I'm smart enough to do a tech startup with no tech background. And so I did. I started a company. It was called Hive. The whole idea was to help accelerate people with their ideas in a digital format. And yeah, I mean, who am I to coach people on how to, get their ideas to market when it was my first time? That failed miserably, but I learned a lot. And after I decided it failed, i.e., I ran out of money, I decided to go get a job at another startup. Long story short, that failed. I met the co-founder of my next startup, started that, it failed. And then finally I decided maybe it was time to go work for another startup. And I did that for probably 6 months and showed up to work one day and they were laying off the entire team. And so at that point, I decided I needed a break. And I went to work for a company called Founder Institute. And it was a really interesting opportunity. It was like a startup that was helping startups all around the world, creating startup ecosystems. And it was just very meta. Like I got to work with startups like in every, it was like just like crash course in entrepreneurship and just realized that, you know, creating companies all around the world and finding product market fit and solving people's problems, it just created this entire new world for me. And I realized in that moment that entrepreneurship for me was very elusive. You know, people didn't talk about it a whole lot when I was growing up. I wasn't exposed to it. And frankly, if there was an entrepreneur club at Cal Poly when I was there, I didn't know about it. And so this was my journey, right? I got to a point with Founder Institute where it was clear that I wasn't going to become the CEO. And frankly, I thought I could be. So I quit. And I started my next company, which was Gateway, which was a great opportunity to enter the cannabis space. I took everything that I had learned from that startup journey, what it was to create value around the world and help people create their ideas. And I said, you know, where can I apply those learnings and create the most impact? And that was the cannabis industry. It was a place that it seemed like it was inevitable that it was going to become legal, that there was a true value that was being created there. And so we launched Gateway, and over the course of 3 years, got the opportunity to raise a couple funds, invest in companies, help build the network, help build the ecosystem. But at the end of the day, it failed. It wasn't a great business model. It was way too early for this developing market. When you're running on a fund model, you need, you know, returns to keep things going. And it was just not ready, but it was a great opportunity. Nonetheless, a failure. And then I decided, you know what, maybe the incubator model is not right, but now I've cut my teeth on venture capital. I'm going to launch my own venture capital fund. Unfortunately, the transition away from Gateway was not so easy, and it put kind of a tarnish on my ability to raise a fund. So that effort failed too. I know it's starting to sound like I'm a huge failure, but failure is a choice. And failure is also just learning as long as you keep going. And so coming out of all that, I had the opportunity to launch Vertosa, originally called Nanogen, and it was solving a massive issue in the cannabis market. And I had so much perspective on the cannabis market because I would spend 3 years investing in companies and trying to identify where the opportunities were. And I realized that this was a market where all these startups were coming and pitching me, like hundreds of startups pitching me their billion-dollar ideas. And I realized that the only way there was going to be billion-dollar companies in the market was that the market could support a billion-dollar company. And so, you know, we decided to invest in the supply chain, and we built a company that helps support and grow companies without them having to learn everything that I've learned over the last 10 years. And that's what we're doing today. And we've been doing that for the last 3 years. You know, my knowledge in the space has allowed me to diversify my own personal brand. So I am the host of Marijuana Today. I've hosted a number of different conferences and what have you. I get a lot of visibility into the market because of all of this, and allows me to angel invest in particular companies, advise, or be on the board of others. And it's become my personal brand that I'm an entrepreneur here in the space. I'm not just the CEO of Vertosa. And I think that's an important thing, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So to wrap up, by my count, that's about 6 failures, 3 ongoing efforts, one pit stop at a company, which was very nice, one abandoned career, and a partridge in a pear tree. But that's the life of an entrepreneur. And I think the important thing to recognize here is that you are not your company, and you are not your idea. You are an entrepreneur. And that is a great opportunity. And so whether you are building the next great company that may or may not fail, it's a part of the journey. But like with all that failure, why? Why do we do this? Like, why is it important that we do this? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. We're not doing it for fame, fortune, and friends. If that is the goal, there are much easier ways to do it. Go be a banker or something. Go make a buttload of money. Go make some investments and live your life on the beach in Costa Rica. I don't know. You can make a lot of friends that way. It's about making impact. It's about seeing a future that others don't and fucking creating it. Like that's what you get to do as an entrepreneur. And it puts you in this rare air of like doing something at all costs to make a future come into existence that others don't see. And that is an incredible opportunity, but it's not easy, right? And the most important part is that you keep going relentlessly, and that you prop yourself up with the right mindset and the right structure so that you know that you can keep going. And so over the years, I've developed a lot of tools to help myself get through this, right? So, and you know, my hope today is that I'm able to just impart some advice just from this journey that I've been on, you know, now 15 years later after leaving school. It's, yeah, I don't know, you know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to impart this on you and better position you at all, because we're all on our own journey. No one has the right way of doing anything. It's all your own journey. Like, and that's the incredible part, right? No one is any smarter. Just because they sold their company for $1 billion doesn't mean they can give you the advice that's going to make you successful. And I think that's first and foremost the most important part. What makes an entrepreneur is that you are out there constantly collecting information to make yourself the best entrepreneur you can be. So I think the first point of advice is that it can be a lonely journey. You've probably heard this before. I think Elon Musk, he had this quote. I'm going to butcher like the verbatim quote, but it's entrepreneurship is like staring into the abyss while chewing glass. That's pretty bleak verbiage coming from one of the most inspiring entrepreneurs of our day. But what helps kind of get through that is building your tribe of entrepreneurs like you have with this incredible club and sticking with it. And even what's important about that is that they're on their own journeys. They're doing completely different things, hopefully unrelated to what you're doing. And if you keep them close and check in, those are going to be the people on the same journeys. And I have a group like this for myself. I meet with this small group of CEOs every month. Small mastermind group, completely different companies. Someone runs like a hospital, another one runs a law firm, another like a PR agency. But we all have the same issues and problems and ups and downs. Like we rate ourselves every time we meet. Like, how are you doing personally? How are you doing professionally? It's like, oh, Monday I was a 2, but today I'm a 10. And that's just the life of an entrepreneur. But having that group of people to like come back together and talk about the journey, talk about your employees, whatever it is, your loved ones, it's important because there's no one that truly understands the journey like another entrepreneur. The other part that kind of goes along with this, and it's kind of related, is kind of a stoic mindset. And a lot of people have discounted Stoicism. They say, oh, it's like pessimistic. It's like really like dark and drab. But I've studied a lot of Stoicism. I got like 4 books like right here that I commonly recommend to people. And I think the main takeaway from Stoicism that helps entrepreneurs is to constantly expect the unexpected and to not be overreactive under any circumstances, right? Like even this week, I'm going to tell you, like, I'm in the cannabis industry, right? It is, it's challenging. Running a company is challenging, period. Running and challenging an emerging market that at one point, or still is, federally illegal, could be, put you in weird positions. And one of my employees this week, there was nothing nefarious about it, but they shipped one of our products that, has like CBD in it, non-psychoactive, if you don't know what CBD is, but they shipped it up to Canada. Canada happens to regulate hemp and cannabis all under one scheme. So if it's crossing borders, it's like cannabis. And as the CEO, yes, the border guards seized that shipment and sent us a notice. And immediately, I think, what is the worst case scenario? This gets trumped up to be international drug trafficking. And who is responsible for that? The CEO. But after reading this at 11 p.m. at night, I put down my phone and I went to bed. Got my 8 hours of sleep and woke up the next morning and started having some conversations. Younger entrepreneur Ben would never been able to do that. I would have probably been up for 3 days cursing at everything that came across my path. And rightfully so. I don't want to fucking go to jail. My family sure as hell doesn't want me to go to jail. And this is just a part of being a business leader. But again, it's an opportunity. This is where you prove yourself, right? Your ability to remain composed and to deal with the problems that come at you is what defines you as a great leader. Now, I hope not everyone encounters these types of issues on a regular basis. It was also a really fantastic week. I got $2.5 million in commitments for our current fundraising round. And, I should be happy as a clam. But as you respond to the bad, you also kind of like, slow down your responses to the good. And, from my response to that is like, well, it's not really actually money until it's in the bank. And then once it's in the bank, I'm actually responsible for spending that money responsibly. So Stoicism, look into it. Ryan Holiday is a really great author. He has like a daily news feed, like the Daily Stoic. Like I just kind of keep up on it. And it's a good just reminder of like, the true value that an entrepreneur brings to the table is their ability to expect the unexpected and to deal with the daily trials and tribulations. And what I would say is, if you are not comfortable being uncomfortable, now's a good time to really start practicing, right? Find a way every day to make yourself uncomfortable. Put yourself out there, learn something new, and always be pushing your limits, because that is what being an entrepreneur is. And then kind of like my last 3 points here. The last time I came to Cal Poly and gave a talk, I talked about the dichotomy of being an entrepreneur. And, I've thought a lot about since I gave that talk, because time is so limited that you can't be everything to everyone. It's really challenging. But you have to know that is the expectation. People want you to be inspiring and visionary and show them the future. But at the same time, they want you to be so pragmatic and know like your profits and losses like the back of your hand, and you need to know exactly how you're going to spend the money and get the ROI. But at the same time, they want you to unlock the $1 billion opportunity for the market that doesn't exist yet. But they want to know your total addressable market today. and they're going to give you investment based on that total addressable market. And it's your goal to like get them to see past that. And this is every day, every part of your life is dissected like this. And that's where that loneliness comes from, is because only you and other entrepreneurs understand that demand. But it's only the entrepreneur that is able to navigate it and take solace in the fact that, shit, you're doing your best. Yeah, it can be draining. I'm just being vulnerable with you right now. Being an entrepreneur is the greatest thing in the world, but it's not easy. And I think that's the most important part, is that you're signing up for something. If you are going to be an entrepreneur, that you're signing up for something that's never going to be easy, even with the greatest success, because there's always something about it. You know, long nights and weekends away from family and friends, and there's only so many things that you can choose. It's like, oh, I'm going to choose health and the company this month, and I might lose a few friends because of it. Or I'm going to choose a little bit more balance on the friend side, and I'm going to lose time to exercise. And so you got to make that choice. What are you? Anyone that follows me on social media knows that I really value being a good father, and that I hold my family very important. I also like to stay healthy and fit and exercise. It keeps my brain sharp and keeps me energized. What that doesn't leave a lot of time for is friends. So my best friends are the ones that I can see once a year, and they'd be okay with it. They know that I'm there if they absolutely need me, but I'm not a great friend. Hopefully they're empathetic, which is required of you. And I think what helps me be as successful as I have been, which doesn't sound very successful based on all those failures, but I still think of myself as successful, is empathy. Whether you're super sympathetic is another thing, but at least being empathetic, you understand what is going on in other people's lives. And so why is empathy so important? It helps you understand your customer and serve their needs, because at the end of the day, you need customers to make yourself a successful entrepreneur. It's all about serving their needs, and sometimes serving their needs in ways that they don't see. On top of that, you need to be empathetic for your team. Like, what does your team need? Like, how are you going to build a culture if you're not understanding every individual's personal trajectory? What do they want to do with their career? How does your company help them get to where they want to go? And how do you align that? Only being truly empathetic will allow you to do that for an entire organization. And then finally, empathetic to your family and your friends. Like, what are their needs? If they're important to you, like, how do you fulfill their needs and still dump your entire life into building your company or your career? And when I say career, that word for me is so important in this talk. I never saw entrepreneurship as a career opportunity, right? And now it is. And I think that's such a wonderful, it's such a wonderful development for people in general. Like, entrepreneurship is a gift. Like, entrepreneurship is what changes the world and creates value. And now it's perceived as like a viable career path, right? And so I think what makes it viable for you, so that you aren't failing with each one of those failures or learning opportunities along the way, that this is all about you. It's about you. And it's always about you. Whether it's for a company or not, transitionary period, podcast, you're building your reputation and your brand. And I'm going to reiterate, whatever your idea is now or your next idea, that does not define you. What you do to bring it to fruition, what you do to make it survive, what you do to like bring a team together to make it happen, that's what defines you. And when people give you money, if you're out there seeking for investment, and I know a lot of my thought processes are often centered around building venture scalable companies and getting venture capital. Not every entrepreneur is going to go do that. Not every idea is designed for venture capital. So I think that's important to say. But if you are out there getting money from people, it it has almost nothing to do with the idea. Almost. It has 90% of the decision of people giving you cash is because of you and your ability to see the future and your ability to create the future. And so just remember that, like everything that you do, every failure is just another opportunity for you to learn more and apply it to your next adventure. Everything that Vertosa is my entire career. So Gateway wasn't a failure because Gateway gave me the foundation to launch Vertosa. Founder Institute wasn't a failure because it gave me the inspiration to launch Gateway. And all those things leading up to Founder Institute led me to understand that my true passion is helping people create their ideas, not necessarily my own. And so that's what I get to do still with Vertosa is I sit down with people when a product is in pitch deck form, and instead of asking them how much active ingredient they want in the product, I ask them, what are you trying to deliver to your consumer? How can we help you deliver on your promise? And that's what makes us different. And it's the intersectionality of my journey that has allowed us to create a unique brand and reputation in the space. And so I think it's so important, like follow those threads of interest. If you need to take a break and go work at a company, there's no shame in that. You're going to learn something that's going to apply to your eventuality. So there is no failure. There is only learning. And the only time something, quote unquote, fails is when the entrepreneur gives up. But it's okay to give up because you move on to your next thing, right? Just don't give up on yourself because you, again, you are the brand.
Thank you so much, Ben, for all of those insights. We certainly really appreciate it. So I've been keeping track of the questions over here. And one of the ones I want to ask you first, to build off of this idea of failure, is what is your approach to success metrics, both in yourself and with the companies you've worked with, especially in the early stage? How are you really gauging your success, and how is that influenced by your failure?
Yeah. So breaking it up into two, for myself, it's all like, for myself, it's as long as I'm constantly learning and trying to be better, as long as today I'm a better version of myself than yesterday. And sure, you're going to have down times, right? But even when you're feeling down, there's opportunities to learn from there. And so if you look around my office, there's a lot of books, right? People have been there before. People have done it before. So there's this a very simple phrase I always like to say, like, leaders are readers, right? I'm constantly trying to find ways to learn more, read more, listen to more. Clubhouse is great. I don't know if you're all on Clubhouse, but like I've been getting on Clubhouse and you just have access to so many amazing minds and you can get up there and interact with them. It's a great way to kind of, again, build your personal brand. When it comes to the company, you got to find out like what are the business metrics that are going to lead you to success, right? And I'm constantly trying to do this with business. Is how do you create a framework so that you will inevitably be successful? Of course, you have to understand, like, you have to go through the typical like business canvas like process, like what is the market, like what is the problem, what's the solution, all that kind of stuff. But after you have have that figured out, then you set up the habits and the metrics so that it's like, okay, if I do this every day, if I track this every day, and we're getting better every day, then we're going to inevitably be successful. And then you just, again, push yourself every day to be better than the last, right? Happy to get more specific about that. Like when it comes to our business, every organization in our business has metrics that we're following, even our HR team, right? But on the sales side, it's like we boiled it down to how many leads do we need to get every day, or how many demos do we have to do every day to eventually get to that, what is the booked revenue that we're bringing in every day, right? So happy to do side conversation on how to develop those metrics, but it could be long depending on who we're talking to.
Okay, maybe we'll have the chance for that a little later on. But a lot of our participants have noticed all those books in your background, and are asking what your favorites are for some good recommendations. So tell us what you have there behind you.
Oh man, I love this. Okay. Shoot, I should have like an automatic answer for this. Uh, I haven't read it in probably 5 years, but I talk about the value of creating your own brand, and I think Reid Hoffman's The Startup of You might be a little outdated, but I don't know if it's possible to be outdated because it talks about everything that I talked about thus far. It was what really inspired me to just kind of keep investing in myself. When I quit being an engineer, the only email I had was, ben@fairandpeers.com. And I left that company. I'm like, oh shoot, how are people going to get a hold of me? And so I realized I was really behind the 8 ball on that one. So Startup of You is a really great one. Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About Hard Things is a great compendium of just the challenges that every successful business has been through. And it just it shows you like how much hard work and how fleeting success could be. Like how many times companies have $0 in the bank and miraculously are able to make payroll on Friday, or like someone's infusing cash from their own bank account. I mean, even with Vertosa, I've, between my co-founder and myself, we've personally infused capital into the company 2 or 3 times in our journey to make payroll. Of course, the employees never knew it. Like that's how hairy things can get sometimes. Another example that if you're more into the storytelling, Phil Knight's Shoe Dog is an incredible story about building Nike and how many times Nike almost died. And it's just so enlightening and reassuring actually to see what it takes to create a truly successful company sometimes. If you're kind of looking for more for the business management side, the Radical Candor by Kim Scott has been incredibly impactful. It's just how to have hard conversations with people and how to build company culture around just that honesty, right? Like how to truly care about people. And because you care about them, it's not about sugarcoating things. It's about helping them improve every day, because you're all trying to help each other improve. And that creates great company culture. I could go on and on. This is real life, folks. Anyways, a Guide to the Good Life is a really good kind of distillation of the Stoic mindset in kind of modern society. So this is what by William Irvine. I thought this was a really great read. I was literally on a plane with my 3-month-old son heading to Hawaii in the middle of this argument between Trump and North Korea, and there was nukes pointing at the US. And I was just like, well, shit, we might get nuked while in Hawaii, but at least I'm with my family. Kind of dark. Sorry.
Thank you for that. Sorry about the crash down there in your background. Okay, to transition off of the book topic a little bit, I'm sure you get this question often, but it's also at the top of our chat here. How will the federal legalization, when it happens, of THC and other cannabis products affect Vertosa?
It's a great question that I can only speculate. But let me. So another one of my favorite books. I'll weave this into the rest of my answers. There's a book called A Beautiful Constraint, and the whole premise of the book is that constraints are opportunities for entrepreneurs. And so being in an illegal market with many regulations, one of those being, there's no cross-state commerce with cannabis, right? We can't create a product in California and ship it to another state. That is a massive constraint. And there's people that be like, oh, federal legalization would be great because then all of a sudden we can ship product. It's true, but federal legalization might also bring in Coca-Cola, AB InBev, and all of a sudden they're shipping product across state and killing your business. And so currently right now, the constraints are an opportunity for us to grow our business and actually create value by providing access to other markets for people building on our platform. And so federal legalization could be great for our business if we are well positioned to work with these other larger companies. And we have grown to a place where we know we're better to be acquired than someone try to compete with us. And that's where you want to get. And so anyone that is in a highly regulated space right now that is looking towards some sort of legalization and opening up to these larger corporations, you want to get to that place, right? All the small brands, they might suffer a different fate, unfortunately. The cannabis industry, this is always an interesting conversation to have because there's this overarching advocacy view too, right? And well, there's a lot of peer capitalists that have come into the space. I mean, it's opportunistic, right? And so if you're a peer capitalist, you might answer the question by being like, look, we like it being illegal right now. It gives us opportunity to build a bigger like stronghold on the industry, and then it can legalize once we, are already $1 billion company. I'm more of on the advocacy bent, where I believe that consumer access to cannabis is Trump's business. And so personally, I welcome federal legalization and getting people out of jail, getting their records expunged, and providing just greater access to medicine, right? So if we can be a part of that, great. If it kills my business, y'all know I'll start another one.
For sure, that's true. This is not your first go round. Thinking about the cannabis industry in a more of a kind of a general sense, when you gave your talk a year and a half ago, it was kind of just getting known, and it'll probably continue to go. So, looking like, I don't know, a year to 5 years in the past, and then into the future, what do you speculate about just kind of the cannabis industry in general?
Yeah, I think based on the pace that it's going, it does seem like our ability to educate the consumer and all the different applications of cannabis will continue to accelerate, right? When I launched Gateway, I always said that if we were successful, cannabis in of itself wouldn't be its own category. Will we get there in the next 1 or 2 years? I don't know. But what do I mean by that? Cannabis has so many applications, right? It can help you sleep better. It can help cancer patients regain their strength and appetite. It can help pets with arthritis. It can help athletes with muscle recovery and all these kind of things. And so it is the refinement of our understanding of the cannabis plant and its many applications. Because in cannabis, there are hundreds of bioactive compounds, right? And the US is a little bit more educated on it. Not everyone, but a little bit more. But if you go to other countries, they still just think it's like, oh, cannabis, Rastafarian. It's like there's still that connection. And if we can break past that and whatever stigma, surrounds it, then that's where the true opportunity is. And, we're already probably, 3 to 5 years ahead of what's common knowledge in the market, right? There's certain combinations of cannabinoids that we can use in medicine to wean people off opioid drugs, right? So we have a study going on right now with a hospital up here in Oakland, where all they deal with is traumatic injury patients. And so we are doing a controlled study with 250 patients over the course of 3 months. It's a double-blind study. So one group of patients will still be prescribed their opioids, but they'll also be given a 3 times a day cannabinoid treatment. And they'll be asked to take the opioids as they see necessary, and then we're going to cross compare that with the blind group or the placebo group, right? And coming out of that, like, that will be a groundbreaking study. It'll be the first time that like it's truly been done with live patients through a hospital with doctors, like to like get people off. And this could be like really groundbreaking. And the funny thing is, like, we already know what the results are because we already have evidence of it, but it's just like, because of federal illegality, like, the information and the education has been sequestered for so long, and so we're just having to go through the hoops of proving it. We know that we have access to certain patents for skincare, for instance, where we can get into phase 3 FDA studies in a matter of months instead of years for a fraction of the cost, because we already know people don't die off of cannabis, right? And so there's so much opportunity. I think you get one study, 2 studies, and then all of a sudden the research money is just going to flood in. And I think that will actually literally start happening this year.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see that trend. To build on that, another kind of combining 2 questions we have here is one, what has been your greatest challenge as a CEO, and then 2, how has that challenge maybe related to navigating this regulatory space?
So the greatest challenge, especially in this market, is to have the vision of what the future is, but to have little control over a lot of the externalities that control that timeline or trajectory, and the cash management that goes along with it, right? So there are a lot of things about business where we glorify the vision part. It's like, oh, they're a visionary. It's such a great idea. Look how fast it's growing. But there's so many times in business where you don't have control over things that dramatically impact the trajectory of your company. And so what we've had to do a really good job at is, frankly, raising enough capital to sustain some of those ups and downs, keep marching forward and making things happen, to the point where, I'm not only a CEO, I'm advocating for the industry, like educating people on why, what we're doing is important. I'm also getting involved in policy. I'm lobbying, like, especially with the new legislative session, like senators and assembly people in California, to help change the rules to make a more viable industry. And this is all on an undefined timeline because we don't know when federal legalization is going to happen. And so it's kind of mapping all that out and having it make sense to people. And as CEO, you have this just radical transparency on the world that you're living in and the uncertainty, and then trying to keep your entire team confident and marching forward every day and staying positive and excited about what you're doing, regardless of, some of the bigger shifts that might be happening. And, inevitably, you will have to make sudden and quick changes to adapt, and navigating those is what really defines like a great CEO, right? So when the pandemic hit, for instance, I had to cut 40% of our operating expenditures basically overnight. I didn't have to. I could have drug it on and like see what happened. But then we would have just been burning cash while our revenue dropped by 50% overnight, right? And so it's that quick action, knowing that that's what you have to do. Your job as a CEO is not only to build great culture and make your employees happy, but to keep the business alive, right? And again, it goes back to that having to be everything to everyone, right? You have to be caring, and you have to, you need your employees to like you, right? But you also have to be pretty cutthroat at certain times for the sake of the business. And I think that's the hardest part, is making those decisions and making them swiftly and having confidence in it. And it's, I make this joke. It's like, I am actually naturally an empath. So like, I feel other people's like emotions pretty deeply. You almost have to be like an empathic sociopath at times, right? Which sounds really, really scary and gross, but like, you need to be able to feel all those feelings and understand, because it helps you navigate those really quick and swift changes. And we were able to cut our OpEx by 40% pretty much within a week of the lockdown happening. We had to let go probably about 20 to 30% of our staff. And within 2 weeks, our culture was better than it ever was. And that's hard. so I'm giving myself, I guess, a little pat on the back for doing that. But yeah, I think, yeah, it's just one of those moments where that's definitely not something that I planned. It's like expect the unexpected. I didn't expect that.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, there's been so much I expect last year. So to come along with these challenges, who was kind of the person that you would confide in? Did you have any mentors along the way? You mentioned your CEO group. How did they help you? So who are the people who kind of you've leaned on along the way, I guess?
It's a great question, and there's no one person that I've been able to lean on for all this. It's like it's this patchwork kind of like support that I have, right? I think first and foremost, my wife has been incredible and supportive in this time, and the pandemic has actually given us a great opportunity to grow closer, because frankly, I spent so much time out of the house before the pandemic. She didn't actually really know what I did every day. She just knew I was gone for 15 hours a day. But now I'm home, and it's at least gives her an understanding of what I have to do every day. Outside of that, having been an investor, it has brought me really close to my own investors in Vertosa, and so I can call an investor and be like, "Look, I know what I have to do from the investment side, and I know that's what's going to make me a good CEO in your eyes and all the other investors' eyes, and like swift action, kind of a stoic approach." And I think rising above kind of the reality that is happening in the moment, and being able to be kind of like look down on it, like what needs to happen, like from a practical standpoint, and be like, okay, I need to execute now, right? And suiting up and then dropping back into reality and just being kind of that warrior, right? And so investors have been helpful, but like fellow CEOs, right? Especially experienced ones, like that's why advisors are great. Creating your own personal advisory board, your own personal like board of directors, right? People that have been there before, because no matter who it is, they've run a business and they've been at that, on the scale of 1 to 10, they've been at the 10s and they've been at the 1s. Everyone has. And so just like being able to talk it through. The most important person though is, and it sounds really weird, and I've never said this out loud, but it's like yourself, right? And that's why wellness and meditation and everything is so important as an entrepreneur, because you have to be so centered with yourself and just check in with yourself constantly, and be kind to yourself, right? Like it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to cry. But you need to know that like it's never going to be so bad that you won't recover, because again, it's the journey, right? The company might die. Like I said that this week. I'm like, this could end my company. This could put me in jail. That would be really terrible, actually. But it's never going to be so bad that you can't keep going, right? And I think that's the most important part. There are times, like you have to schedule time to be with yourself, and I do it. Even though I'm working from home, at the end of the day, I'm like, I need 10 minutes before I walk out that door and get back with my family, because I'm just going to sit here in this chair and I'm going to stare out the window and like just collect my thoughts on what happened today and what needs to happen tomorrow. And I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, you certainly have the perspective to say that with kind of all of the starts and stops you've had through your career. So we only have time for a few more questions here, but I think we're going to get to this one and then maybe one after this one. This is kind of what have been some of the most important steps as you've embarked on creating new things, and then also as certain things have kind of finished or died off. What have you learned from each of those kind of two processes?
Man, okay. So when starting things, right? It's momentum this is why passion is so important, right? That's why people always talk about passion. It's so cliche to talk about, but like really what it comes down to is momentum and vision. Like you got to see the future and you got to make it happen come hell or high water, right? That's what attracts investors, actually. An investor is going to jump on board and give you money because they're going to get that feeling when talking to you that shit, I better get in on this now because this is going to happen regardless of whether I put money in or not. So I might as well be along for the ride, right? You need to make everyone feel like that. So you're like hell or high water, you're doing whatever it comes to take. Like many of the digital platforms that we see out there were done manually, for a good portion of time. It's like, oh, you put up a nice website. It's like, oh, you're literally sitting there with a spreadsheet, like in your office, like calling people, connecting people and all that kind of stuff. And then someday automating it, right? It's like, if you don't have the skill set, just start making it happen. So it's that much easier to prove it to someone else that it's going to be inevitably successful if they get on board, right? So if I had to boil it down to one word, it's inevitable. You have to be inevitable, right? When closing something down, if you've made that decision, close it down. Like, be confident in it. It's like, this is the decision. Don't let it stretch on. Don't let it overlap with something new that you're trying to launch. It just takes up way too much mind space. And frankly, if it's gotten to the point where you want to shut it down, you might have some PTSD around it. I still go through that. Gateway, because it was a fund, like I still have investments out there. I still need to like manage that portfolio. But there's some things that, like I had broken up with my business partner. There was some pain around that. The last year of Gateway, there was, I was on the board of a company where we had to remove the CEO. We were in a 12-month lawsuit over that. I was like trying to save companies at the same time. It was just, you can tell by the way I'm talking about it, it's like there's just like stress and strain anytime I get an email about it. So to whatever you can do is like, whatever your next thing is, like ensuring that you're creating the space to focus all your time and energy on it, right? It's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to put something to bed. But the best thing you can do is do it responsibly. If you've incorporated or created an LLC, just going through the steps of actually winding it down, it'll make sure that nothing creeps up behind you like in the future, right? So those are the stages. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So you to finish off here, you have peppered a lot of advice throughout this whole conversation. But a question we always like to ask at the end is, what advice would you give to your Cal Poly self, or yourself right when you were graduating? So if you can, I don't know, sum it up for us, give it your best shot.
Yeah. Give me a minute just to like kind of like distill the last hour. I think there's a best way to contextualize like what I wish I was more humble when I was coming out of school. There's a lot of energy. You think you can do things better. Like you wonder why you're not being given the respect you deserve, especially entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs just like, you're bullheaded. You want to make things happen. And that's great. But there's so much to learn from people. Even the dumbest people in the world, if that exists, right? Like the people that you like don't respect, there's so much to learn from that. The time I learned the most was, well, there's two times that kind of really like where I feel like I picked up the most that are here today. So one was my engineering career. First 6 years not being an entrepreneur, I learned so many invaluable skills. I proved myself in many ways. Like I found like where my strengths were. And frankly, little things like I still use the review process, the employee review process that I had in my first company that I worked for. I've implemented it now at 3 different companies, 2 that weren't my own, and now Vertosa. And so it's just like little things, like take the opportunity to absorb everything, and that helps you create your skill set for the future. The other thing is that right now, depending on your life experience, and frankly, some people have really dramatic life experiences, and I salute those people because it cues you up for what it is to be an entrepreneur. And that's why you hear a lot of entrepreneurs that have these crazy life histories. Moving forward, that envelope is constantly going to be pushed. You know, I talked about the 12-month lawsuit, right? So that was a 12-month period. I had never been in a lawsuit before. And I had a friend that I was, you know, crying to, and he told me, he said, "Hey, look at it this way. At least you're worth being sued." And you know, during that time period, there was like two companies I really cared about. I was on the board of one, and another one was an investment, and they were of substantial level where they were both trying to raise a Series A, and I was literally trying to save both companies at the same time while being in this lawsuit, while trying to wind down Gateway. And that put me way outside my comfort zone. I had never experienced stress of any magnitude near that level. But what did it do for me coming out the other end and having survived it and having launched a company after doing it? Like, I honestly feel like I can take on anything in the world, with the mindset that I will always be surprised and there will always be something harder. But I am better positioned today to run a company than I ever have been previously in my career. And that's, again, the opportunity with the journey. So every part of the journey is an opportunity to become a better entrepreneur.
Fantastic advice. Well, I want to say thank you again from everyone here, and from myself and from Cal Poly entrepreneurs. We really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, and hopefully some of the people here will connect with you in the future, or stay in touch in some other way.
Awesome, Sophie. Thank you so much. Like, if you do want to get in touch with me, you can hit my website. It's B as in boy, B Larson, LARSON.com. Yeah, there's many other ways to find me. You probably, you know, hit me up wherever you find me.